Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're honored to have Senator Roz Dance with us this morning. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we just passed crossover.
Yes.
So I think things have slowed down a little bit, maybe on the Senate side.
Are you kidding? Not for a minute, because I have like 4 standing committees that I serve on, and then one of them finance. I serve on 3 subcommittees. And after crossover, the next thing is by the Sunday they have a budget to the people to see what both sides are introducing. Both the Senate and the House will be introducing their first stabs at the budget. So the crunch is on because we have to finish our work so that the staff can then print a document and have it ready for us to review on Sunday. So no, it will not peak for us till maybe after Sunday. Then we'll probably be back to normal hours, hopefully.
And of course, you've got many more bills to consider because the House has 100 members versus the 40 on the Senate side.
Exactly. On the Senate side, we have gone through our little over 1,200 bills, and we've saved some, lost some, and whatever is left goes over to the House for them to deliberate. But it's 40 of us, 100 of them, so of course they were more ambitious. On our side, I'd say the biggest generator of bills for us to have to deal with was Senator Serval, who introduced about 61 bills.
61 on his own.
Yes, on his own. Now it's heard of because he did that. But on the House side, with 100 members, a lot of them new for the first time, and they have so much that they wanted to put on the table that they put it on the table. But by the time they get down to us, I'm sure they would have whittled that down a peg, but it's still double the number going in versus the 40 of us. And we have to look at each one of those pieces of legislation that makes it over to our way, and then still travel over to the other side to defend our legislation on the other side of the House.
So like everyone else, I'm sure you predicted what occurred in the House of Delegates in terms of 15 new Democratic members.
Now, you know, I would love to take credit for all of that, but I will tell you if anybody is honest on both sides of the aisle, no one really expected what the local paper, can I say the paper was? It called it a tsunami. The Richmond Times called it a tsunami, and really it was, as we all watched. And we were, cautiously optimistic, maybe 5 or 6, and then 8, but never did we expect to have a 16 number that was being considered. So that was huge, and with that comes a lot of new people, new ideas that have to adjust to the process. And for them, I think it's a rude awakening. As you mean, I have to go through the subcommittee and full committee, and it never sees the light of day on the floor committee, the floor where the 100 members are voting. So that's the reality they're dealing with, but it's a process. And but from even the new members, there are some good ideas floating, and one of them was Delegate Foy that I was really impressed with. That she came up with she had legislation that addressed the larceny threshold, moving it from 200, and I think she optimistically was looking at $1,000, and ultimately a more senior person, because I was a good, and which is I guess a positive thing is that it was bipartisan as far as both sides of the aisle deciding to take a look at that. And this time, for the first time, when we saw a bill come through, we didn't care, Democrat or Republican, we were signing on. I was one that signed on to that good bill, as I called it, because it was moving it from $200 threshold to $500. You know, incrementally, I've learned here you don't get it all in the same bite.
Right.
You have to sometimes nibble on it, and this is a good start. But what was even better about that, she started, she has it, so I'm hoping that when the bill comes over to our side that her signature will be there, that she signed on to the bill that did get out. But it's a good thing for Virginia because it's bipartisan, and I was just so happy to stand with the new Speaker of the House, the new governor, when they both were in agreement that this bill gets through, it's going to be signed into law. So the Senate had done his work on the Senate side to the House, and ultimately I think that we have something that's of merit that gives us pause for optimistically that we're going to be on the right train at the end of this session of getting some positive things done.
That's going to make a huge difference in the lives of many people in the Commonwealth. No longer will they be saddled with, at least on a going forward basis, a felony conviction, for example.
Right. It's sort of like one of those things that you have young people and it's wrong. It is wrong to break the law. Let's be clear about that. But to think about it is that if you had a pair of shoes for $199, but then one brand, then you said, no, I'm going to go up one step, and the next pair is $201, you move from a misdemeanor to a felony. And we know how long it takes. And in Virginia, you have a felony. You might ultimately have your rights restored and certain things, but you have a felony. And that affects you for the rest of your life. So that is major, considering how many other states had gone to a higher fee, but we were still left behind. But the significance, it took 37 years to get to where we are now, but we're there, and it's great to have it as a bipartisan scenario going forward, and with both the Speaker and the Governor in agreement that this should happen.
Now, there's still a 21-19 split in the Senate. Republicans are still in control. There's now a 51-49 split on the House side. Do you think that's made a difference in terms of legislation?
To some extent, yes, but then to some extent, it still hold the line. But that's where I'm cautiously optimistic, because we've seen the line, the merging of both lines with the leadership. And I think I'm cautiously optimistic that leadership is going to be the answer for us moving on certain issues, because right now when you have the Speaker and the Governor talking and in compromising relationships where it's a win-win, one side is not receiving and the other not, in a sense. Neither side is getting, we'd like 1,000. 500 is a good start, and both of them agreeing on that 500. And I'll go back to that felony threshold. That's a big move. I'm cautiously optimistic that we're also going to see, hopefully by the time we finish, because we're just a crossover, but before we leave here, and I'll be realistic, we might have to come back, but that we'll move off the dime towards Medicaid expansion. I really think it might not be the way we would like it. There's going to be some twists and turns in that road, but ultimately it would be a better plan, healthcare plan for the citizens of the Commonwealth. So I'm really cautiously optimistic that at the end of the day we're going to do that. I know we have vehicles, strong vehicles coming out of the Senate that we approved unanimously yesterday, tomorrow, or whatever, that we approved before crossover, that goes over to the House. And of course, the House has already come up with a vehicle that they see a change in as far as moving towards. Some might not like the term Medicaid expansion. I say it boldly, moving towards Medicaid expansion. But at the end of the day, just like we had, I hope we do better than the grand larceny. We went half the way. I want to see us go 90%, 100% of the way towards getting a desired outcome for Virginians.
So one of the new conditions, as I understand it, for Medicaid recipients currently will be a work requirement, for example.
That's from the House.
Yes.
That's not from the Senate.
Yes.
So again, those are some pieces that have to be worked out. And if there is a work requirement, and I really have not seen the House's version, hasn't come to us, it's there, but we haven't addressed it. And I say we because even if it goes to the healthcare as it should policy committee, because it has money attached to it, and just like the Senate's version that went out, the money was not attached. It's the bill, which says the money comes from finance and appropriations. We'll have to say how that funding will come through. And so that's the point of negotiations will take place. There will definitely be conferencing on that bill where both sides will have a chance to come to the table and try to come up with a compromise that is acceptable, that moves us towards Medicaid expansion, with the last bite at that apple coming from the governor during his veto session in April.
You've had a wealth of experience because of your background in healthcare. Highlight the fundamental problems as you see them now. I mean, obviously, we need to expand Medicaid in this state. We see that highlighted at least once a year in Wise, Virginia, where people line up overnight to get health care.
It's the cost. And really, people that are at a certain economic level, low income, they automatically get the Medicaid, Medicare services. The people that's in between are those working low income, and that's why they call it the gap. You're working, but you make just enough money to put you in a bracket that you can't afford for health care. The cost of health care is written, and really Medicaid expansion addresses 400,000 people. It is less than 400,000, but we use that number.
So
but then there are others as well. So it's like Medicaid expansion is one, but that's not the end all for everybody. There are still other areas of health care that needs to be addressed. The cost of it, as far as can I afford this plan or that plan? Right. So it's still one battle is the Medicaid expansion, but then again it's the insurance factor. And the insurance companies will tell you, well, that's because the driver is because of the pharmacist and pharmacy and what they're charging, and we have to cover that, and so on and on and on. But ultimately, what happens to the constituent, to the consumer that has to have this product? So this is not, Medicaid expansion takes us filling the gap, which is major. But not only that, it's the dollar factor, is that we send our money to Washington, and it's not coming back. And there's a point of, if you get your money back for this that you sent them, that allows you, like if you had, you won the lottery, you don't spend all your money, hopefully you will invest. It gives you an opportunity to invest in some things that ultimately, in other preventive measures for health care, education, all the things that you need to help people make better choices in life, and that lowers the cost of doing business in Virginia, the cost of health care in Virginia. So there are so many, the environment, improving the quality of health care in Virginia. So there's so many things that we could benefit from getting our money back from Washington, money that Virginians pay in taxes.
Now, as I understand it, at one time the federal government was going to pay 100%. All of that money cannot be recovered.
The best we can do is 90%, but 90% is better than 50%. And that was a concern with the original bill that we had, that the vehicle, I call it, that we have coming from the Senate. But their options are there. Some of the major things that we wanted to see are there. So let's give us the best vehicle we have is the one that we send to the House. And of course, the House is not going to like ours. We will probably have some reservations about theirs. And then we'll end up in what's called a committee of conference, where both sides come together. Most people know that there's a committee of conference between the budget that comes from the House and the budget that comes from the Senate. That has to be resolved. And Medicaid expansion will also have to be resolved by both. And probably, again, the last word coming from more negotiations that will take place between those two bodies, and then the governor's office between now and the April reconvening of the veto session.
Now, what about the opioid crisis? I take it that has exacerbated the whole health care issue.
Yes, and like I said, there's more than just, when we said Medicaid expansion, that's one, but we're dealing with mental health and the importance, and we have bills, and I was proud to sign on to one of those bills that allow us to look at mental health. People separate that when you're talking about health care. Mental health is physical and mental health, And we are now having a bill that has passed the Senate, going to the House, that says we need to define instructions to teachers, that kids learn, adults learn, that there is physical and mental health as one entity that we need to be defining, so that takes away the stigma that people put on mental health and the importance it is to have more psychiatrists, more physicians that are providing that services to people. Because you and I, to an extent, we are not 100%. And there are so many people that could benefit from having not to be concerned about, I need a service, but how will I be perceived by others if I say it's mental health versus physical health? But we say it's one and the same. It's a holistic approach to dealing with the people. And so there's the message coming from the General Assembly, and I'm feeling comfortable that it will pass the House as well, because we have doctors and nurses that are legislators in the House as well as in the Senate. And that's going to be a good focus to put us on as we move forward.
What's happening with individuals who are still in some of the training centers? I know a number of years ago there was a settlement with the Department of Justice. Some of the training centers have closed. There's been legislation introduced this session to prohibit the closing of training centers.
Well, we're down to, there are a couple of training centers now, and that's one in Virginia Beach area, southeastern,
southwest,
yeah. And the Lynchburg Training Center is the one that has caused the most heartburn, because it was one of the oldest, I think the oldest facility. And actually, Southside Virginia Training Center, where I served, was probably the second oldest, and our facility closed down because they said all clients must be housed in the least restrictive environment. So the argument is that they're the most medically fragile and the most behaviorally challenged people have been concentrated into an area, and the belief that there is no service other than. So again, I haven't worked inside the facility setting. I know how I felt about the clients were like family, and I was concerned about them going into how would they make it in this huge world that did not understand their needs. But I found out over time that services are being provided, but it's still a hard point of getting a parent or family member from feeling that, how do I trust that the community, that the future communities will take care of my child if I'm not here to advocate for them? And so they can't get past that. And we are, as legislators, we are responsible for bringing forth the requests from our communities. We can say by request if we have concerns, but then it says, then it's up to the members to make that decisions. And so, therefore, that bill will probably pass as far as the language. But again, that's language, and with that comes a cost. So I know one of the factors that they're addressing, is going to be addressing, is the feasibility of it, because even if there is a need, is it a need to be at an old facility, even if it's been renovated and money been millions put in it? But is that the best cost? If there is a need, could there be a smaller structure? So all these things have to be worked out. But they're trying to redefine what it is because of their concerns of what will happen to my child if the larger community is not ready for them. And I want them to live a long life and as long as they possibly can. And so that fear is there. And so how do we address it as legislators? Some of us agree that there is a better way. But then there are those who say, but I don't want to let my child be the example of that way if it's not going to work. So we're in that dilemma of where do we go from here. So at the end of this session, we will decide, and the majority will decide, where do we go from here? And again, trying to find that compromising solution that eases some of the concerns and moves us down the road.
So when we're talking about children, we're really talking about people who may be adults by now who have been institutionalized for a long period of time.
Yes. In the past, that's the dichotomy of the concern, is that in the past, if you had intellectual disability, then you were housed there. It was an automatic. And in the years since, the decline was there because families found a way to keep their children at home. And that's when we have Medicaid waivers, and that's the dilemma we have too, because the people said, I did not put my child in an institution. I've been providing these services, and they've been getting these services in the greater community, and they could get more of the services if we did not have those structures that separate them from the greater community. And they're the ones, they call themselves Ali, we want a life like yours in that bigger community, to just make sure that that community has a place for all of us, that we're not separated, that we are a part of that larger community. But that transition, I think, will continue. But it's slowed down as it should to make sure that everybody feel comfortable as they move from one stage to the other. But we have been moving from that stage for over 20, 30 years now.
Let's take advantage of your expertise as a member of the Finance Committee and those three subcommittees as well. Of course, the state is confronted with an interesting dilemma. As you know, as of the end of last year, there was a lot of revenue that came in, non-withholding revenue, and at first blush, it looked like it might be a windfall, but I know the chairman of your committee, the chairman of the Appropriation Committee here is saying, let's be cautious, because we don't want to be caught in a circumstance like we did back in 2014, I believe, when we ran short as a result of counting those revenues in advance.
Oh, yes.
Is that something that your committee is looking at and is concerned about?
Yes. We strongly understand the importance of the rainy day thing. We also strongly understand the importance of what's happening in Washington and our military bases, and how much of the military are actually in Virginia, even though people sometimes see Northern Virginia as Washington. It is Virginia. And so if we are not diversified, where all of our funds is coming from one direction, then we could lose the status we have, that we're trying to build ourselves as fiscally, soluble state, that we can maintain our AAA ratings, that we can borrow when we need to borrow, that we can provide the service that we need. And then again, if you would ask those in education and other areas, they would say that no, they don't have an excess of money, because if they did, we would be receiving the dollars that we should at the rate, because as when we identify those problems, and our priorities are still there: healthcare, education, public safety, but you have to make sure that you can fund them. So we reduced everybody. They said, you haven't gotten us back to where we were originally, so no, you really don't have access to start new projects, because there are so many people with wonderful, wonderful new projects that they would have us venture into. Some we need to. Broadband, we need to have that. The information highway, if we don't keep up, our competitors will leave us in the dust. And this new governor said something that's very important, and he says that he wants all four quadrants of Virginia to be strong, to be able to have jobs, to be competitive. And we cannot do that if all four quadrants do not have access to the super information highway. That our kids, no matter where they live, have access, that they can research and they can be up to speed the same as their colleagues or their neighboring students in Northern Virginia or the Hampton Roads area or the Central Virginia. All four quadrants of Virginia should be strong. And so to do that, it's going to require us to spend money to make sure that we're there. So it might not be where people think it should go, but we have to really think futuristically where we are and where do we want to go.
You mentioned the AAA bond rating, which is significant. It's been with the Commonwealth for 50 years, if not longer. How does that relate to maintaining a balanced budget, and contrast that with Washington, D.C.?
One thing about us is we balance our budget. We have a zero-based budget. We have to balance our budget. That is a requirement of our law. And I'll tell you, for localities that found themselves like in the region, like fiscally stressed, they realize you can't declare bankruptcy. We don't allow you to declare bankruptcy, so you're gonna work this out. But when we have a AAA rating, that says we can get borrow money at lower fees than other states. And in some cases, I don't know, even for the city of Petersburg, that they were able to get, like when their bond rating was so low, because of the state's rating and their backing and support of us, then they were able to get the funds they needed. especially the liquidity funds that they needed to make sure that they could balance the scales and keep moving. And I was super impressed because their last audit report showed that in 1 year, with the state's assistance, the finance, appropriations, everybody at the table helping them, that they were able to turn it around in a year.
I take it another example of bipartisanship between the governor and the General Assembly relates to some legislation dealing with reducing overburdensome regulatory requirements, especially on small businesses. I think that bill would call for a 25% reduction in regulations over time.
Yes, and all of those things are bills that are there trying to help, because what we realize is that if you look at the definition for small business and at the federal level, would you believe that about 95% of the businesses, and you say, come on, we think small business, we may think less than 25, that you employees or, 4 to 25 or something of that nature. No, it doesn't work that way. Small business, by contrast, as I said, about 95% you can be a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar business and still be considered a small business. So in Virginia, we're looking at that and trying to make sure, even now we're crafting and sometimes in language, that our small business shows some gradients as far as in this category there are certain opportunities for you, even if it's Virginia Economic Development Partnership, that there are certain areas that still will address even that small business that's below the 25 employee mark. So I'm impressed with what we have coming, hasn't arrived yet, but that things that we're working on to make that happen. We have a new president for Virginia Economic Development Partnership that is talking this language of everybody in. The governor is talking everybody in, so I expect to see several proposals that will come through by the end of this session that will help small business.
Now, what about Go Virginia? How has that worked from your perspective?
Go Virginia is still, for me, as far as a good idea that is being developed with the intent that it would be like incentives for localities as well, to venture projects in different areas require different things. And I will tell you that's a study in progress for me, so I won't even attempt to know all that I should know. I'm on economic development, and I'm getting there. But Go Virginia is one that I need to be more up on to give you more extensive information.
30 seconds. How are things in Petersburg? Are things improving?
Things are looking much better. Things are looking up in Petersburg. Again, as I said, when you can see after 1 year that they've gotten their budget, that it's a balanced budget, and after 9 years or so of not being balanced is there. The schools have a great leader in Dr. Marcus Newman. Things are looking much better.
Great. Well, thank you for being with us, Senator Rosalind Dance. Good luck.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I am Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.